Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. After the overwhelming success of Dirt, Alice in Chains returned with their self-titled album, also known as Tripod, a collection of raw, emotionally charged tracks that delve deeper into their signature blend of grunge, metal and hard rock. Recorded amidst personal struggles and uncertainty, Alice in Chains would be the band's last with the vocalist Layne Staley. While the band faced internal challenges and a changing musical landscape, this album stands as a powerful and enduring statement in their discography and a testament to the talent, struggles and vision of their departed lead singer. Discussing the album with me is my co-host, Mr. Felipe Amarim. How you doing, bro?
Doing great, man, and you?
Good, yeah, excellent. All good here, all good here. Another miserable day in England, as normal. What's it like in London? Is it good?
Yeah, it's a bit grey, isn't it?
It's the normal one. We just call that normal here.
Yeah, normal day.
But yeah. Anyway,
I've signed up for this. I can't complain.
Yeah. These are in the terms and conditions when you arrive.
I knew what I was signed up for.
Well, from the terms and conditions of joining Britain to the terms and conditions of listening to this podcast, if you guys do us a massive favour, if you enjoyed the episode when you get to the end, do us a favour. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, scroll down and give us a little review. Hit the 5 stars, write a sentence or two, and it means that we're going to be seen by more people in the podcast charts. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with the new content. So, we had a different episode planned for today, but since the announcement of Black Sabbath's last ever show, again, isn't this their third final show?
Yeah, they had a final show with Ozzy in 1979, I think, when they kicked him out of the band, and then they had another one. Maybe in the 90s, the reunion tour.
Yeah, there was one that's actually
Late
called
90s.
The End.
And then The End, the last ever show again. And they're going to do another one. I think that's actually the last one now. Yeah.
It should be, yeah. And I think what this is a celebration of Black Sabbath in the annals of heavy metal, because they will be being joined by a plethora of heavy metal bands. You've got Metallica, Gojira, Slayer, Mastodon, and one of the bands is Alice in Chains, and I kind of thought we should sort of get on them a bit. Now, Alice in Chains are an interesting one because they're kind of that middle ground, aren't they? I mean, they're obviously a grunge band, but there's some music which is just so obviously pushes into the heavy metal side, and then half of their music sits very comfortably in rock. So I'll just pop through some album details quickly as usual, and then you can have your say on that. So the album was released October 31st, 1995, recorded between April and August of the same year at the Bad Animals studio in Seattle. The genre is grunge, heavy metal and hard rock, and it clocks in at just 1 hour and 4 minutes long through the Columbia label and produced by Tony Wright and Alice in Chains themselves.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I think this album wasn't meant to happen in a way, isn't it? Like, I think there were no as I said, they got quite heavy, and I think I would ask you this question: do they cross the line between grunge and metal?
Let's go into the
Leave
first
that
topic.
for the end.
No. I want to address it, but I did just want to give a bit of background and context to where grunge was in 1995. So grunge had started to fade and die. Kurt Cobain died in 1994. Nirvana were no more. Pearl Jam were changing their sound a bit. Soundgarden had one more album to release, but would soon break up. So the core of what we know about grunge was fading. Grunge did not have a long lifetime. Grunge took over as the most accessible heavy metal / rock music genre after glam metal died out, and hair metal died out in the late 80s, early 90s. Nevermind being released killed off glam metal. So you had this wonderful 4-year period where we get some of the best grunge from Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. But
Stone Temple Pilots
as well, yeah. But by 1995, rock was heading more towards alternative rock and post-grunge, which we've spoken about with bands like Foo Fighters, Stone Temple Pilots, which was grunge, but just made a little more accessible. Metal was heading towards nu metal, which again was making metal accessible with bands like Korn, Slipknot, System of a Down, that were just taking the ideas of heavy metal and incorporating something different. System of a Down incorporated Armenian folk rhythms, Deftones were incorporating some sort of ambient stuff, Korn were incorporating some rappy stuff, Slipknot were incorporating electronic, sampling. So all of these genres that grunge kind of came together for were starting to expand and grow, and so because of that, grunge died out as what it was. So this is interesting because I think this album, to answer your question, it's got its fingers in so many pies, isn't it? Because half of the riffs are just out and out heavy metal riffs, and there's a subgenre of heavy metal called doom metal. I'll put a song. Quick note, whilst we talk about this album, there is a dedicated playlist in the show note and description below where any song we mention will be put into that playlist, as well as all the songs on the album we're talking about. So whilst we talk and we mention a song, you can go to the playlist and have a listen. So I'll put a Candlemass song in that so that people get an idea of what doom metal is. But half of the riffs on this album, they sound like they could have been done by Black Sabbath or a doom metal band.
Yeah, it could be compared to classic hard rock or heavy metal like Sabbath, because I think the singer mentioned in an interview he wasn't a big fan of what was going on in the 80s, and his favorite kind of music is what the bands were doing in the 70s. So they clearly have that influence from the 70s. There's a little bit of psychedelic rock in it, and there's definitely loads of classic rock influences, and so I think you can tell that if it sounds like metal, it doesn't sound to me like modern metal. It sounds like old school classic heavy metal, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it depends what you want to call heavy metal. I know
Yeah.
we've had this debate a number of times where you think speed is an icon of heavy metal,
Yeah.
or one of the characteristics of heavy metal. And obviously, in music like this and Black Sabbath, you don't have the speed element, but you do, in my opinion, have the distortion and the dissonant sounds, and that to me is what encompasses heavy metal.
Speed is an interesting thing because there's not a single song on this album that's actually fast. I didn't check the exact BPMs, but I think there's nothing that can be considered fast. It's medium to low tempos. There's one point, I think track 9, So Close. Yeah, it starts almost like a punk kind of groove, or like a heavy Motown groove for drummers out there who know what Motown beat is.
Yeah.
But it's like really fast paced, but it's not really, because it's kind of a double tempo vibe for the first few bars, and then it just becomes like a normal slow beat.
Yeah.
And the whole album seems to be like that.
It is, and that's what encompasses what we call doom metal and sludge metal, which came off the back of Black Sabbath, because we had Black Sabbath do their thing. Then in the 80s, doom metal and sludge metal became a thing, which was just making it really gritty, muddy, distorted guitars playing very slow, heavy riffs. And then as an extension of that, you've got Alice in Chains sort of taking those elements and mixing it in with their hard rock aspects and making grunge, or not inventing grunge, but giving grunge some characteristics. Nirvana did it. Although they were cleaner, songs like I don't know, I'd say, think about "Come as You Are." If you take that clean guitar riff and you distort that, that's a Sabbath riff.
Yeah, could be. Makes sense.
Cool, but so let's talk a bit about Alice in Chains and their background, because previously, I think it was 1992, they had an album called Dirt, which was a huge success, and it was one of the definitive grunge albums. People reference that, along with Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger, Nirvana's Nevermind, Pearl Jam's 10, those key albums that really shaped what grunge was. Now, since that album in 1992, drug use became a major issue for the band, or not necessarily the band, but within the band, because the singer Layne Staley became a massive heroin addict and suffered severely due to poor health conditions, as well as just addiction in general, which I'm not sure, if people don't know, addiction is not just someone can't stop taking a drug, it's psychological. It affects your brain, it affects your physical health. It's a serious issue. So because of that, the band stopped touring because of his deteriorating health. They did, however, then do an acoustic EP called Jar of Flies. Now, something I just wanted to touch on that is that it was released in 1994 and it debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, which is massive because that was the moment that Alice in Chains, although Dirt was a big album and a success, hitting #1 with that EP brought them into more of the spotlight.
But an EP sometimes is not as pretentious as an album, isn't it? Sometimes you're just doing it because you want to put something out. I think the label was kind of like, we need to capitalize on this.
Absolutely, yeah. And because of that, I just wanted to identify 2 songs off that EP, No Excuses and I Stay Away. Now, these songs are important because they start going away from the heaviness Dirt is a very heavy album. I've put one of the songs in the playlist already, and it's a, you know, because they're from Seattle, because of the vocals and because of their general production and sound, it's a grunge album. But like I said, you do different production on that. You stick that, you make that a band from, I don't know, bloody California.
Yeah.
Some people would class it as heavy metal. You put some shouting over it, that could be a heavy metal album.
Yeah.
But it is what it is in this context. And so they started with these two songs, moving away from the out-and-out heavy aspect. And that's important because of what is to come in this album. We might refer to this album as Tripod, because I think it's just easier for us to call it Tripod instead of Alice in Chains. And for the reason it's called Tripod is, for those watching, you can see behind me, the dog has... Oops, we want the camera off. Not that. The dog has... Oh, this isn't working. There we go. The dog has 3 legs. And that's the album cover, iconic album cover for the time. And yeah, because the dog has 3 legs, they called it Tripod.
Tripod.
So a little bit
I think it's how most of the fans call it.
Yes, yeah. So we'll
some people say the dog album.
The dog album,
but, but it's
Try Dog. Why did no one do that? Try Dog.
Try Dog.
Right. So, but because of that, this is where I think some of the most significant parts of this album lie within the music. The melodies and the vocal harmonies are almost prevalent throughout the whole album, aren't they? Nearly every vocal line is doubled.
Yeah.
Between Layne Staley and the guitarist Jerry Cantrell.
I think one of the reasons for that is like Jerry Cantrell was writing a lot of the material, not only the riffs, but lyrics and melodies, because Layne Staley wasn't available for a huge part of the recording process.
Yeah.
He was just not, his health was, as you said, deteriorating, and he just wasn't there for the recordings. So they would just get hold of him at any time. Oh, is he okay? Is he awake at 1 a.m.? Let's get him into the room, record his vocals. But then I think Jerry Cantrell was like kind of writing the melodies. It makes sense that he was also a lead singer. So you don't have one lead singer in the album. And when they're harmonizing, I think there's one, I don't know if you noticed that, it sounds like, well, it's very common when you have a clear lead vocal and the harmony for that vocal, you put the harmony on the background.
Yeah.
Now, what I've heard with the mix in this album is like both vocals are normally at the same level, or pretty much the same level.
It's almost co-lead vocals, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's harmonies, but you can't really say that this is the lead vocal and that's just the backing vocal.
That's absolutely
I think they're both lead vocalists.
Other bands that do that, bands like System of a Down.
Yeah.
Obviously, they have a lead singer, but in some songs, especially in their later albums, they do songs where they're both at the the level. The guitarist would sing the lead once, and then it would be the singer, and then they'd switch, and then for the next verse they'd switch it around. And I think this must, maybe where this idea came from in terms of just, But this was a move they were forced into because, as you said, Layne Staley's heroin addiction became quite a problem because he was often absent. I don't want to say this out and out, but I'm just assuming maybe because he was high and not willing or able to turn up to the studio, or because of his addiction, he was unwell. Hangovers, so to speak.
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Apparently, they had to cancel a tour with Metallica, so they were booked to tour with Metallica and Suicidal Tendencies. And again, that proves your point about them being that close to heavy metal, because those are really heavy bands. To have them in the same bill, you would assume they have to be able to entertain that heavy metal audience. And they were preparing to go on tour with Metallica, and Staley was like not fit for the rehearsals. He was turning up high or not feeling well, or whatever. And then I think the drummer was the one who said, "No, we can't do this. It's not. It's going to be a disaster." So they couldn't go on tour because of that.
You can't miss your shot when you're supporting Metallica, can you?
Yeah, exactly.
Got to do that.
And then they had to cancel. Apparently, Metallica, they were mocking them during the tour. They would play the riff for Man in the Box, and just sing different lyrics on top of it.
Oh, really?
So like making a reference to the fact that the band wasn't there. Alice in Chains wasn't there with them.
Well, if you've committed to something, it's not good luck, is it, to pull out? Because the singer's addicted to heroin. If the singer had cancer and was unable to actually get out of bed, fine, but.
Yeah, it was. But then the label put out the statement saying that was, due to health issues, they're not going to go on tour. So that was, in the end of the day, it's although everyone knows about it, it's kind of a personal thing, and I think it's fair for the label to say it's health issues, a personal thing. We don't, the band doesn't want to talk about it. They wouldn't do interviews or anything like that. You know.
And who the hell are Metallica to talk about sobriety anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. Imagine cool. Metallica, mocking someone because they're not sober.
Cool. Well, let's carry on with the music then. As we said already, in terms of the sound between this album and Dirt, there's not much difference in terms of how heavy it is. I don't think they go to another level of heaviness here. But what they do, and this is what I read was because of Toby Wright, the producer. He developed a heavier sound on the guitars, a sludgier sound on the guitars, a moodier kind of production, which just makes it feel even heavier than what you hear on Dirt. And I think, you listen to the thick guitar tones. I read someone described it as suffocating, which I think is such a brilliant adjective to use. Yeah, the sound suffocates you. You're so bogged down. Everything sounds so heavy that metaphorically, it's suffocating you because it's weighing down on you. And I think that's a great way to describe it. The thing that sticks with me throughout most of the album is the dissonance in the melodies.
Yeah.
Or even some of the guitar parts. And for those, I think we say different dissonance once every 10 episodes on average, and we're just going to remind you what it means, just in case you forget. Dissonance is when two notes played together, or one after the other, sound wrong. It's as simple as that. Consonance is when it sounds good. If you think, let's use things to describe. Consonance, think of You Can't Always Get What You Want by Rolling Stones. Two notes. You can't. Nice. Now let's do the dissonance, which is Black Sabbath's Black Sabbath. It goes do, do, and do. Yeah, those three notes played one after the other is completely perfect to the way I describe dissonance. I'll put the songs in the chat so you can hear it for yourselves. But yeah, dissonance is when something sounds wrong. And if you listen to this album, you hear it. And there are plenty of moments where in the vocals, the way that like the melody the vocals are singing, the intervals between the vocals, or the vocals are singing something nice and the guitar is playing something that clashes. It's a moment where your ear goes, "Ooh, hold that doesn't sound right. That shouldn't work." But because of the way in Jerry Cantrell's songwriting, it does, right?
Yeah, it's a composition. They knew what they were doing. So those dissonant notes are there for a reason. It's not like an improvisation that went wrong or something like that. And I think another good word to describe dissonance and to describe the album is disturbing.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about it. Like, so if you have too much dissonance, you feel like there's no resolution. That's how I feel about it. Until you get to a normal interval when two notes sound like they work well together.
Yeah.
Until you get to that feeling, it's disturbing. To hear dissonance after dissonance is disturbing. And I think the album, lyric-wise and sound-wise, is quite disturbing. And that's probably the intention anyway.
I'm sure it is, yeah. And I'm just trying to remind myself. I think it's the sound, yeah. Grind. So the first song, and this is very clever of them to do this. The first song, you've mentioned about tension created because of the dissonance. And so, for listeners who are not familiar with music theory or the intricacies of music, as we said, dissonance is when things don't sound nice. But because of that dissonance, tension is created. And as Felipe said, sometimes you want resolution. One teacher told me when we were studying at uni that jazz is just a bunch of tensions released.
Yeah,
one after the other. That's what jazz
exactly.
is. But in a serious sense, what Felipe is saying is go and listen to the song "Grind," the first song of this album. And throughout the first minute or whatever, it's full of dissonance and tension. And then suddenly, the resolution with the chorus.
I was about to mention the song. The chorus is that's great. It's the perfect example of how you get away from tension and you deliver something that sounds like brighter and more pleasant. And I think, that's the idea of choruses in general, isn't it? It's the most radio-friendly part of the song, is the most pleasant part of a song. But in that case, the contrast is huge. I think they've done it in a perfect way, really.
But you hear it in general. If you think about heavy metal, you might have, I mean, there's so much metal that this is far from a generalization. But certainly, a few bands I listen to, there will be very intense, heavy verses with fast riffs, screaming, and then suddenly a singing chorus comes in. because I think good musicians know that, unless you're talking about death metal, it can't always be full on 100% intense.
Yeah,
There has to be breaks and resolutions in the music, and they do this fantastically on Grind. Like you said, like I said, that chorus comes in, and it's funny because I know we're not moving on to sort of the lyrics and themes yet, but the album is quite reflective, I feel, of the state of the band at the moment.
Yeah.
It's very dark, it's very sad, it's very gloomy, but every now and then there's a little glimmer of hope that comes in the form of a harmonious chorus.
Yeah, yeah, or just like an acoustic guitar sound rather than distorted riffs.
Yeah, great point.
Or a clean guitar solo over a heavy riff.
Yeah.
So I don't remember exactly.
I wonder if you're talking about Sludge Factory. Because
Let me double check because I remember this solo being. It's on my notes, because
that's cool. Well, I wonder if it's the same one because I've got Sludge Factory guitar solo, almost country-esque.
Yes,
is that the one? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So I wrote down clean and bluesy guitar solo in contrast with the riffs, because the riffs are really heavy, and this when the guitar came, it was like, he's just taking the piss. I can't believe someone is going to have that clean guitar. So when he plays the bends and all those, the most impactful notes in the solo, they don't actually sound, they don't sound as strong as they should sound, because there's no distortion, there's no effects. It's a clean guitar solo,
it's
and I think that's part of it. Yeah,
Mark Knopfler guitar solo. Isn't
it, exactly. It's like if Mark Knopfler is playing a solo on an Iron Maiden song, So like it's just, but it works. They make it work. I think that's part of what they wanted as well, kind of challenging the rules. I imagine at that point they were not sure if the band would carry on, and as a matter of fact, it didn't. That was the last album of this lineup.
Yeah.
But not having that certainty and having the pressure of the label to release something commercial, something's good, they were really pissed off with the label. Again, how many times have we talked about bands that got really pissed off with the labels because the label wanted this and they wanted, like, I want this album to be good, to be commercial, and to be released as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And some of the songs are also about that.
Yeah. We'll get onto that in a second. We'll get into the lyrics and the stuff, but I just wanted to finish off by saying that, there are other things that make this album a bit uneasy to listen to, a bit more tense. In songs like Brush Away and God Am, you've got unconventional time signatures, which sort of just throw the listener off a bit. In Frogs and Head Creeps, you've got those really psychedelic elements that you alluded to earlier, where it is kind of just lots of droning on the sounds. And as you alluded to, you've got something completely different, because in Heaven Beside You, the intro and the pre-verse, or I think it's all that section of music that comes before the verse, you've got an acoustic guitar leading the rhythm, and then you've got a guitar that, do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Motown horns.
All right.
When you have the like that, it just reminded me of that. It was really weird because I was listening to it and I thought, this is so different from the first 5 songs.
Yeah.
So unusual. Yet they found a way to make it work.
Yeah.
It's great, isn't it? Just to finish off on the music section, I kind of sort of identified a little formula going on. Heavy riff, proper heavy riff, some dissonance in the verse, or a melody that doesn't move very much, followed by a major or a harmonious chorus to resolve the tension.
Yeah.
So they just utilize
Makes sense.
this.
Do you know something that can be added to that? It's all riff based and melody based. There's no in a good way. I'm not saying that the solos are not good. What I'm saying is the solos don't matter.
Yeah.
Like, as good as they are, it's all about the riffs and the melodies. My opinion. It's just an opinion. What I'm saying is, like, I've listened to the solos, like that clean guitar I talked about. I think was really cool to hear that, and I think the phrasing is amazing. I think Jerry Cantrell is a much better guitar player than I thought he was when I listened. I knew he was really good, but when I listened to this album, like paying attention to every guitar detail, that guy is a genius of layering guitars and writing structures. Is really good, and I think he's clearly serving the music. So it's about melody, lyrics, riffs, the solos are just like an accessory to the song, you know, to make it better, to make it more interesting, to break away from a certain structure. But the solos are not as essential to the songs. I think it's kind of a grunge thing as well, isn't it? It's more about the overall sound.
Yes, definitely. It's about the
someone
sound.
shredding a guitar.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Cool. Well, I mean, let's move on to, well, I'd say the lyrics and Layne Staley is what we've called this section of the episode. Um, you always look a bit more into the lyrics, so I'll hand over to you in a second. I just wanted to say that talking about Layne Staley, the reason that we've coupled these together is because, as you can tell through some of the lyrics, just listening to this album, it's almost like a premonition of what is to come. Layne Staley sounds very weak, and I don't mean that as a negative side to his vocals. I'm not saying he's bad on this album, but I feel like if you listen to Dirt and then you listen to this album, you can tell something has gone wrong in between. His vocals sound very raw. He sounds very vulnerable. His vocals don't. They sound a bit fragile. Someone described it ghostly.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Because there's no wrong notes. There's no poor delivery. There's no bad execution. It just doesn't sound as meaty or as big as it did in Dirt.
I think it's like he lost the intensity in a way. So it's not intense. It's not powerful.
You've just summed up what I was. Yeah, you've just summed up in one word what I was trying to say.
There's melancholy, but it's melancholic, but it's not. It's not. I can't say it's not powerful. It's not, it is powerful, but in a completely different way for me. It's powerful because it's sad, because it's, as I said, it's weak in a way. Is losing his strength, but you know, kind of suits the lyrics, right?
They do. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the lyrics? Tell us.
Yeah. Just a couple of examples of the lyrics that I really like. In Brush Away, I found the riff and the vocals scary in that song. It's like, you know, really heavy stuff. And that, so the lyrics they go on like, I try to get away and yet I stick around. So fall and crawl away and brush away, lose ground. So that's about his addiction, you know, so trying to stay away. There's a lot of it about him trying to get away. It's not, so that's why we don't judge people in that condition. You know, we talked about this a million times. Like, it's easy to say when it's not you, you know, and say, oh, maybe that guy with that money and fame should just like go into rehab, which he tried and it didn't work. But it's easy to say, but it's not that easy to do. So another song, he talks about his frustration with not being able to get away from the problem is Goddamn. Because that song, the whole song is about him believing in God, but not being happy with the outcome of his life. So it's like, why, God? Why is my life like this? You know. So as far as I read about him, he believed there was something, there was a creator to the universe, but he was like, okay, if there is a God, why am I suffering like this? And I don't want to be this guy. I don't want to do the things I'm doing, but I can't get away from this behavior. So that and also it's somehow tragic and comic. One part of the lyrics of this song, the 8th track, God Am, says, "World dies, I still pay taxes." I love that. It's like, yeah, you know, so everything is collapsing, but you still got to pay your taxes. He's complaining. So there's a little bit of humor in that, which I find amazing for someone who is in such struggle, you know.
Yeah, but
so it can get quite dark when you keep reading the lyrics and listening to the songs. You know?
Here's another one. The song's Over Now. The song is called Over Now,
which is the last one.
It's the last one, and these. Well, it's over now, yet I can see somehow when it's all gone wrong, it's hard to be so strong.
Yeah.
That's a really sad song. And I feel like...
Being the last one of the album as well?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to allude to this in my monologue at the end, but you look back at the album now with a lot more sadness now that you know he's dead. I wonder if we'd look back at it with so much sadness and sorrow if he had kicked the drugs and stayed alive to this day. You know, he'd probably look at it and be like, well, thank God that part of my life's over. You know, cool album and everything, but I never want to go back to those days that dark. But I wonder with us as fans and as people who are listening to it for the first time, it's been a sad listen, man. The whole album's been a very sad listen.
Well,
Wasn't
it puts
pleasant.
you.
I enjoyed moments of it, but I didn't sit there going, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to put this album on again." It's very dark.
Yeah, it's like you're going to. It's a journey into someone else's mind, but that
Mm.
mind is very troubled at the moment. So there's literally. It's almost like there's the only positive thing about that moment is the music itself, is the fact that someone is making music out of that suffering.
Yeah.
But the suffering is in the lyrics, is in the riffs, and the whole vibe of the album. I wonder how hard it was for them to go through the whole process of recording and
Well, imagine your
composing that.
bandmates. I don't know about how their relationships. Don't know if they were best friends or anything, but you kind of assume so. To be in a band for that long. Kind of wonder how hard it was for them. Imagine,
Yeah.
your best mate's addicted to heroin. He's not turning up. You're trying to move the band on. You're trying to get things going. You're trying to get the next album
Yeah.
recorded. And the
One thing.
singer is just not is absent.
Yeah,
Not
exactly.
turning up.
And on the other hand, he actually had another project he was involved with. I think it's called Mad Season. It's a band.
Oh,
It's like
Layne
a super
Staley.
group. Yeah,
Wow,
that's
I
a
didn't
funny
know
thing
this.
because he wasn't able to tour, but then he started this project backed by the label, same label, I guess. And with I think there's I don't know which member of Pearl Jam was in the band.
Let me see Mad Season. Yeah, I
Mad
just
Season.
found it.
So they recorded an album that did well and this that, and he's kind of like trying to record music and write stuff. At the same time, he can't go on tour with his own band, and the whole band felt like the band was collapsing. That everyone wanted to do something else, and Jerry Cantrell was recording his own solo stuff. So the first like 2 out of the 3 singles of this album were intended to be Cantrell's solo material. So he was writing songs for his own album, and then he finally decided, no, I want to save my band. I want the band to be back together, and I want him to be part of this again. And I want to use those songs for Alice in Chains instead of my solo thing. And I'm very thankful he decided to do that instead of a solo album. He did some solo stuff later, but the fact that he decided to give that material to the band, because it was in some ways a solo effort from him. He's the main man in the album. He's the one in charge of everything. There's another couple of things that I find interesting about the struggle with the label, which is I think that's the other theme, the other like main theme just after drug addiction, is the fact that they wanted to do something that reflected their own spirit, not what the label wanted them to do. I would say that even the album cover is a bit of that. It's like that dog is not the dog you put in a nice picture because it's missing a leg, so it's incomplete. It's like they felt like the album was incomplete and the label was pushing for the album to be released. That's why there's is it Nothing Song? Is that the name of the song?
Yes.
Nothing Song, which is about nothing. They're just like rambling about anything because they like, well, we're going to write a song just to fill the album. It's actually well written, well structured, and well played, but the lyrics are just about, you know what, I'm going to sing about nothing just because they want me to finish an album. That's what it is about. So, and the other element that made the album great, in my opinion, is what's his name, Toby
Wright, the producer.
Toby Wright, the producer, because the label, they wanted him, and the label said, oh, he's a sound engineer, he's not a producer. Well, he was a producer, but he was, well known as a sound engineer. They wanted someone else to be the producer, but they put him in charge because they wanted a friend of the band to be there with them to fully support whatever they wanted to do instead of a producer. You know how producers work. Their job is to kind of find a compromise between the band's creativity and the label's commercial needs. Most producers would work like that. Okay, I like what you guys are writing, but if we cut this song short, if we change this, change that, the label's going to be happy and we're going to sell more albums. They didn't want that. They put a friend of theirs in charge of the production just so they could play in any way they wanted. And I think that's why the album doesn't have any, like, as I said, there's some formulas of their own, but there are no predictable formulas, not stuff that someone else told them to do.
Yeah, no, you bang on with that.
Yeah.
Great point, man. I mean, I found out that, I'm saying this ironically, and I'm saying this with no intent of humor towards this, but when Mad Season began, I'm just reading, Mike McReady from Pearl Jam was in drug and alcohol rehab where he met the bass player, and then they hooked up with Layne Staley. So I don't want to be insensitive, but it's ironic that the three addicts came together to try and, you know, I've never been a heroin addict. You've never been a heroin addict. I don't think anyone who
never
hasn't
tried
done
any
it
of
can
that
ever.
stuff. No?
Well, and I don't think anyone
Yeah.
Can ever guess how your mind works when you're on that stuff 24/7. But I do wonder if these guys had common interests. You know,
Yeah.
sure, let's write some music, let's jam out, and then after we can go and get high.
Yeah.
And I'm not assuming that's what's happened, and I'm not even condescending them for that. I'm just saying that maybe, you know, it's funny. I didn't know about the Mad Season thing, and when you
Yeah.
brought it up, I thought, what, doing another band whilst Alice in Chains was
Yeah,
getting
whilst your
bigger?
band is kind of collapsing. Yeah,
Exactly.
they felt. I think
getting
I
bigger
don't know
but collapsing as well. Yeah.
I don't know if it was Cantrell. One of them said that they felt like they were betraying themselves, all of them, by trying to do their solo stuff or side projects. They all felt like we're betraying the thing we created with so much love and passion. Wow. And then they decided, like, fortunately, they decided to go back into it and make a good album. It's kind of like, I find impressive how amazing music can come out of so much sadness. Yeah.
Well, but legacy-wise, this album did really well. I wonder if everyone knew what went on behind the scenes, because we look back now, 30 years later, and we can be like, wow, you know, they had a lot to put up with. But the album debuted at #1 on Billboard 200, just like the EP. Grind, Heaven Beside You, and Again were massively successful radio singles. The album itself, in terms of what it means to Alice in Chains fans, I was reading that people love how haunting it is. People love how raw it is, and I think people also love that it's Layne Staley's final effort. And I think that's probably why it's one of the fan favorites.
Because they only had like 3 full albums, isn't it? With him, that's a perfect, like, kind of a musical legacy, because there's nothing bad. They haven't produced anything bad together.
And bands have been influenced by it as well. You know, that hybrid mixture of clean vocals, singing nice melodies with heavy music. Just listen to bands like Tool. I mean, you know, Tool are a great example. Other ones, Deftones, Breaking Benjamin, and Tool actually have cited Alice in Chains and their heavy harmonic style as major influences for them. So it's significant. It's a significant album in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, it's just sad talking about it, isn't it? Because, you know, whilst you know, Ricky Gervais has this funny video about fat people where he says, you know, fat people, so funny because, you know, they've only got themselves to blame. And I think you say you can, I think you can say the same about drug addicts, and it's not, and it's when.
But no one is in that position because they want. That's the thing. I mean, you know, I would assume no one wants to be in that position. And it's and
that's what I'm saying. This, I'm not saying this. I'm not sat here saying this in a condescending, I'm better than a drug addict's manner. I'm just saying it's so sad to imagine what people like Layne Staley were going through, knowing that you have a successful career on the horizon, but you just can't shake this drug addiction, and it keeps you from progressing and eventually takes your life. I was reading he was found. He was 6 foot. And when they found him in his apartment, he weighed something crazy, like 40 kilograms.
Wow!
Because he'd just been so deprived.
Wow, that is sad, and he lost his girlfriend I think a year after this album.
Oh really?
Yeah.
So I just want to. Here we go. Yeah. So right, it was reported that the 6 foot Staley weighed only 39 kilograms when his body was discovered.
That's really skinny.
Yeah. Wow, died from a mixture of heroin and cocaine.
Yeah, what a sad ending to a great singer, isn't it? Well, one of the best.
Do you know what? I don't even have a connection to Alice in Chains. Actually, I do, but I'll talk about that after. I'm quite sad talking about this. I've heard Layne Staley, the odd song here and there over the years. It's the first Alice in Chains album I've listened to, back to front, analysing it, and just reading the history behind it. It's sad, man. Tragic.
Yeah.
Very
tragic. It is. And it's
I was going to say, you know, not all, obviously all is lost for Layne Staley, but for the band, they moved on. And 14 years later, they released another album with the new singer, William Duval. And I'm bringing this up because that's how I discovered them.
I think it's a brilliant album.
Have you heard it?
Yeah. It's
Ah,
really good. We should
I'm
talk about
glad you
that
had,
one
because I
day.
wanted you to know. I want the first song. Isn't the first song brilliant? It's called "Check My Brain," and I've put it in the playlist. The thing. I listened to that album when it came out, so that's 2009. It's almost, how many, 15 years ago. When I first, now that I know that album, and now that I hear this album, and I see that that was the following album,
Yeah.
they've done so well to keep that sound. Because you
Yeah.
listen to that first song, Check My Brain, it starts off with the most dissonant guitar riff ever, and I'll tell you why it's dissonant. Because the riff, for guitarists, you're going to know this, for non-guitarists, you can bend a string. And the riff starts with the string bent. So I'll exaggerate it with my finger on the camera. So imagine you bend the string like that, okay? So the string's meant to be there, and you bend it like that. The riff starts bent, so it goes do 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 do. And as he's playing that, he releases the bend. So he goes do 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 do, and it's just disgusting. I remember listening to it and thinking, "Oh my god!" But then,
But it creates the desired effect,
and
isn't it?
as grind does, the chorus it comes in of that
Yeah.
"Check My Brain" song, and it's beautiful. And the vocals are there, the dual vocals, the harmonies. I
We
just
should do
thought
that. We should do the album one day because
I want to
it's
do it now
interesting.
because, yeah,
Because
having heard
it's
this,
a band that managed to get back together
yeah,
after
after serious
losing
adversity,
like a like iconic singer. It's not like you're not replacing just a singer. You're
yeah,
replacing the guy who actually made
who,
the
yeah,
band
the
what they
sound
are.
of the band,
Yeah,
exactly. God,
that's an interesting one. There's
um,
one thing I want to say
go
about
on,
Cantrell again, because he what I think probably my favorite song of the album is "Heaven Beside You."
good song,
Yeah, which is a beautiful acoustic ballad, and he wrote about the end of his relationship. And again, he only has himself to blame. He's blaming himself for the end of the relationship,
okay,
and he's talking about his girlfriend moving on and doing her own thing. So basically, they were together for 7 years, and then it's not the usual breakup song, isn't it? It's not just it's not him being really sad because someone left him and begging the person to come back. Is about like, yeah, I understand that I messed up, and I understand that my life choices are like bringing the end of the relationship. I think that's
yeah,
all his life choices. It's I think he said that I've got some quotes from him from an interview. Yeah, another attempt. So the song is another attempt to reconcile the fact that my life and paths are tearing me apart from the person I love. So basically saying, I've made that decision. I turned myself into this person, and this person is no longer uh, good for the person I love. So
yeah,
basically, it's interesting just acknowledging your mistakes and and on the other hand, they never say they're going to change, isn't it? It's the kind of like um, maybe they tried, maybe it didn't work.
that's a
So
great
it's
point.
a
Yeah,
beautiful love song in a way,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's acoustic, kind of breaks the heaviness of the album. Fourth track,
mm.
really really good one.
Oh, there we
Yeah,
go. Anything else to say, or are you good?
yeah, we're good to go to the monologue.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Cool, right, the monologue. Alice in Chains' Tripod is a seemingly special album for several reasons. Firstly, it seems to accurately reflect the health of the grunge scene at the time. Metal would march forward, rock stayed strong, and grunge evolved into something more harmonious and accessible. The metal riffs are excellent and compete now with some of the heaviest, doomiest, sludgiest riffs from bands like Sabbath and Candlemass. The rock aspects are prevalent and strong. Heavy, yes, but harmonious, and coupled with some cool rock guitar solos and great vocal harmonies. Grunge-wise, the dirty, distorted, mucky sound of the album perfectly reflects the genre's name. So whilst this is still an obvious grunge album, it seems to mark the start of the decline of grunge as we knew it, showing the rest of the world how to do the individual aspects better. Secondly, the lyrical themes seem to almost foreshadow the demise of the band, turning the album into an almost farewell to Layne Staley, without them or us knowing it. His voice was full of pain and emotion, and listening to his performance to this day is very chilling. Couple this with the raw emotional depth of the sound of the music, it just really hits hard. You don't have to know the lyrics to feel the darkness of this album. The sounds, atmosphere and music make it unmissable. Finally, as alluded to earlier, this is Layne Staley's farewell to the world of music, his last gift to the world of rock. There is beauty in sadness, and listening to this album certainly reminds everyone of how tragic the initial demise of Alice in Chains was, but more significantly, the death of their lead vocalist. Yet out of sorrow, sometimes beautiful things grow, and thanks to the trials and tribulations this band endured at the time, a wonderful album has been executed and released. Is it more noteworthy because of the subsequent events that would follow, the band's hiatus, Layne's death? Even if the answer is yes, it still marks a moment in musical time and allows us to remember and reflect on the talent and legacy of Alice in Chains and Layne Staley.
Really well said.
Yeah, sad, man. I haven't felt this sad doing an episode. Like, it really.
Well, it's like,
we've done bands who have had members die before. We've done Hendrix. We've done.
But it's pretty much the whole album about a tragedy that is about to happen, and
that they didn't.
He knows it's going to happen. He can't find a way out.
Yeah, he knows he does, but the band and the fans don't.
No, maybe, they don't. You know. But maybe they could kind of feel it somehow because it was happening. You know, he was declining in many ways. So it's just really it's a really sad statement of someone's mental health and also addiction and all the stuff. It makes everyone think. I guess I hope that makes people consider those bad habits before they get really, really bad and before you reach that point of no return, because this album maybe it marks that point of no return, is when he knew he would kill himself with that, and he couldn't. It was too late to avoid. So but at least we got some beautiful music, that came out of it. So it's like music finds its way through tragedy the same way it finds its way through happiness, and it's amazing, isn't it? How you can write beautiful music when you're happy, but you can also write when you're really depressed, and it's good to have that kind of insight or kind of I don't know. It's like for me, it's like being inside someone else's head in a way, to experience some feelings that you can't experience yourself, and you shouldn't, Yeah.
Excellent points, man. Excellent points. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. As we said at the start, anything you can do, a review you could give us on Apple or Spotify would be massively appreciated, because it takes 20 seconds of your time, but it does so much for us. And the more reviews we get, the more we go up the charts, and the more people we're seen by. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like this video and hit like and subscribe to stay up to date with our newest episodes. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for being with us once again. Keep on rocking, everyone, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
As usual, long live rock and roll.